At my ultrasound appointment, the room went deadly silent. One moment, Dr. Stevens was smiling, pointing out the tiny flutter of a heartbeat on the monitor, and the next her hand froze. She didn't just stop moving, she turned ash gray. She dropped the ultrasound wand, marched to the door, locked it, and pulled the blinds down with a snap. I laughed nervously and asked if she was joking, but when she turned back to me, her eyes were filled with tears. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip tight enough to bruise, and whispered, "Dominique, you need to leave your house tonight. Get a divorce. Run." I asked her why, my heart pounding in my throat. She shoved a lab report into my hands and said, "There is no time to explain. You will understand when you see this." What she pointed to on that paper made my blood turn to ice and my stomach churn. It wasn't just a medical anomaly. It was an assassination attempt. I am Dominique, 35 years old, and up until this morning, I thought I was living the African American dream. I am a forensic accountant who hunts down hidden assets for Fortune 500 companies, and my husband Jamal is the charming entrepreneur who sweeps everyone off their feet. We live in a historic brownstone in Chicago, drive luxury cars, and we're finally expecting our first child. But as I sat on that crinkly paper in the examination room, staring at the numbers on the page, the illusion of my perfect life didn't just crack. It shattered into a million jagged pieces. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on the man who tried to murder me and my unborn child, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever discovered that the person sleeping next to you was actually your worst enemy. This story is not for the faint of heart, but you need to hear it. The morning had started like any other. Jamal had kissed my forehead, his beard scratching my skin in that way I used to find comforting. He had handed me my morning smoothie, a thick green concoction of kale, spinach, and what he called his secret blend of vitamins. "Drink up, baby," he had said, flashing that smile that could charm a courtroom. "You need your strength for the little one." I drank it even though it tasted bitter, choking it down, because I trusted him. I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with the life growing inside me. Now sitting in Dr. Stevens' office, that trust felt like a noose around my neck. Dr. Stevens has known me since I was a little girl in braids, running around her backyard with her daughter. She isn't just my OB/GYN, she is family. That is why the look of terror on her face scared me more than any diagnosis could. The room was cold, smelling of antiseptic and lavender, but suddenly I felt suffocated. "Dominique, listen to me and listen good," she said, her voice trembling but low. She pulled up 2 documents on her tablet. "This is your hormone level from last month. Perfect, normal. And this is your blood work from 20 minutes ago." I squinted at the screen. I work with numbers all day. I find patterns where others see chaos. And I saw the anomaly immediately. There was a spike in a chemical compound that had no business being in a prenatal panel. "Misoprostol," Dr. Stevens said, the word hanging heavy in the air. I shook my head, confused. Is that for my heartburn?" "No, Dominique." She took a deep breath. "It is a synthetic prostaglandin. In high doses, it is used to induce labor. In lower consistent doses over time, it causes the uterus to contract. It causes the lining to shed. It causes a miscarriage." My hand flew to my stomach instinctively. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the computer fan and the roaring of blood in my ears. "Are you taking anything?" she asked urgently. "Any herbal supplements? Any teas?" "No," I whispered. "Just the prenatal vitamins. And the smoothies, the smoothies." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Every morning, without fail. Jamal insisting on making it himself. Jamal watching me drink every drop. Jamal asking, "Are you finishing it?" "It is for the baby." The bitterness. The strange, chalky aftertaste I had complained about last week, which he dismissed as just a new brand of organic protein powder. "He is poisoning me." I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He is trying to kill the baby. Dr. Stevens looked at me with pity, but also with a hardening resolve. It gets worse, Dominique. How could it possibly get worse? My husband is feeding me abortion pills in my breakfast. How does it get worse than that? She walked over to her desk and pulled a file from the bottom drawer. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Jamal was here this morning. He came in right when we opened asking to speak to Dr. Roberts, the head of the practice. He didn't know I was on shift early. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. Why was Jamal here? He told me he had a conference call. He is sitting in the car right now, waiting for me. He came to file a power of attorney document and a living will supposedly on your behalf, she said, sliding the paper across the desk. He asked specifically about the protocol for maternal hemorrhage. He wanted to know that if you started bleeding out during a miscarriage, if we would respect a do not resuscitate order. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the exam table to keep from falling off. I read the document. It was my signature at the bottom, but I had never signed this. I leaned closer, my forensic eyes scanning the loops and curves. It was a good forgery, but it was a forgery. The loop on the D was too wide. The slant was slightly off. He asked if we would let me die, I choked out. He told Dr. Roberts that you were terrified of medical intervention, she explained, her voice thick with disgust. He said that if complications arose from a natural miscarriage, you wanted to go peacefully. He was setting the stage, Dominique. He was pre-clearing his path. He is dosing you with misoprostol to trigger a massive hemorrhage, and he has already signed the paperwork to stop the doctors from saving you when you bleed out. I stood up and my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the linoleum floor, heaving. I scrambled to the small sink in the corner of the room and threw up. I retched until my throat burned, trying to purge the green smoothie from my system, trying to vomit out the betrayal, the lies, the 5 years of marriage that were nothing but a long con. As I washed my mouth out with trembling hands, the pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The forensic accountant in me took over, overriding the heartbroken wife. Follow the money. That is the first rule of my job. Always follow the money. Why now? Why me? And then I remembered. The life insurance. When we got married, Jamal had insisted on aggressive policies. We are a power couple, Dom, he had said. We need to protect our assets. I have a policy for $5 million. He has one for $5 million. If I die, he gets everything. The brownstone, the portfolio, the $5 million tax-free. And with a DNR signed and a tragic miscarriage story planted with the doctors, he would play the grieving widower perfectly. He would cry at my funeral in his designer suit, burying me and his unborn child, and then he would cash the check before the dirt even settled on my grave. Dr. Stevens was by my side, rubbing my back. I am calling the police, she said, reaching for the phone on the wall. We have the blood work. We have the forged document. We can have him arrested right now in the parking lot. My hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. No! She looked at me like I was crazy. Dominique, he is trying to kill you. This is attempted murder. If you call the police now, he will get bail. I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was cold, detached. It was the voice I used when I caught a CFO embezzling millions. He has money. He has connections. He will hire a shark lawyer, claim the blood test was a mix-up, claim I signed that document and forgot because of pregnancy brain. He will spin this. He is a narcissist, Dr. Stevens. He will charm the jury and paint me as the hysterical, hormonal woman. So what do you want to do? She asked. I stood up and wiped my mouth with a paper towel. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My skin was pale, but the woman staring back at me wasn't a victim anymore. She was a hunter. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. I don't want him just in jail. I want him ruined. I want him to lose his reputation, his money, his family, and his freedom. I want him to wake up one day and realize he messed with the wrong woman. He thinks he is playing chess. He doesn't even know I own the board. But you are in danger, she protested. Not if he thinks his plan is working, I replied. I put my hand on my stomach. The baby. The baby is strong, she said. The heartbeat is strong. If you stop the misoprostol today, right now, the pregnancy should be viable. But you cannot drink another drop of whatever he gives you. I won't, I promised. I checked my phone. 3 missed texts from Jamal. Babe, you okay in there? Meeting is starting soon. Hurry up. Love you. Love you. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated evil of typing those words while waiting for your wife to die. I fixed my hair. I pinched my cheeks to bring some color back. I put on the mask of the loving, oblivious wife. Give me a copy of those records, I told Dr. Stevens. And hide the originals. If anyone asks, especially him, tell them the baby is weak. Tell them I am high risk. Tell them exactly what he wants to hear, why she asked. Because when you are trapping a rat, you don't scare it away, I said, unlocking the door. You put out more cheese. I walked out of that exam room and into the waiting area. I saw him through the glass doors, sitting in our Range Rover, scrolling on his phone, looking effortless and handsome. My heart didn't flutter this time. It turned into a stone. He looked up and saw me, and for a split second, I saw the calculation in his eyes before the mask of the concern slid into place. I walked out to the car, knowing that the man opening the door for me had planned my funeral. But what Jamal didn't know was that he hadn't just tried to kill his wife, he had declared war on a forensic accountant, and I was about to audit his entire life, starting with his freedom. I got into the car and smiled weakly. The doctor says I need to rest, I lied, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. She says the baby is fragile. Jamal squeezed my hand, and I felt his skin against mine, realizing it was the touch of a killer. Don't worry, baby, he soothed, starting the engine. I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you get everything you need. I looked out the window as we pulled away, watching the city pass by. Oh, I knew he would try. But he had no idea that the woman sitting next to him was already planning his demise. The contract was signed in blood today, but it wasn't mine, it was his, and I was going to make sure he paid in full. Driving home from the clinic was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every stoplight felt like an eternity, and every time the car idled, I had to fight the urge to open the door, run to the airport, and book a one-way ticket to anywhere but here. But I could not run. Running would mean leaving my assets exposed. It would mean leaving the portfolio I had built from the ground up since I was 22 years old, in the hands of a man who viewed me as nothing more than a disposable bank account. I adjusted the rearview mirror, checking my face. The tears were gone. In their place was a mask of exhaustion and frailty. If Jamal wanted a weak, dependent wife, I would give him the performance of a lifetime. I would be the damsel in distress until the moment I became the dragon. I pulled into the driveway of our brownstone, a stunning property in Hyde Park that I had paid the down payment for, even though Jamal liked to tell his friends he bought it. As the garage door rumbled shut, trapping me inside with the silence, I took one last deep breath. This was no longer my home. It was a crime scene, and I was the lead investigator working undercover. When I unlocked the front door, the smell of expensive cologne and roasted coffee hit me. It used to smell like comfort. Now it smelled like deceit. Jamal was in the living room, lounging on the Italian leather sofa, scrolling through his phone. As soon as he heard the latch click, he jumped up, sliding the phone into his pocket a little too quickly. His face transformed instantly from boredom to deep, furrowed concern. "There you are, baby," he said, rushing over to take my purse. I was getting worried. "You were gone a long time. Did Dr. Stevens see you right away?" He wrapped his arms around me. My skin crawled. It took every ounce of willpower not to shove him away, not to scream that I knew about the misoprostol, the forgery, and the secret meeting with Dr. Roberts. Instead, I let my body go limp, leaning into him like I could barely stand. "It was awful, Jamal," I whispered, burying my face in his chest so he wouldn't see the disgust in my eyes. Dr. Stevens says the baby is struggling. I felt his body tense. For a second, I waited for the comfort, the reassurance. But then I felt it, a tiny, almost imperceptible relaxation in his shoulders. It was relief. He pulled back, holding me at arm's length, scanning my face, struggling how he asked, his voice laced with a concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Is it genetic? Is the heartbeat stopping? He was fishing for details, hoping to hear that his chemical cocktail was working. I had to be careful. I had to give him enough hope to keep him reckless, but not enough to make him accelerate the dosage. She said my hormone levels are erratic. I lied, the falsehood tasting surprisingly sweet on my tongue. She thinks my body is rejecting the pregnancy. She said I am extremely high risk right now. One wrong move, one stressful event, and we could lose everything. She wants me on strict bed rest. Jamal sighed, shaking his head. That is terrible news, Dom. Really terrible. But we will get through this. You just need to listen to the doctors. Did she prescribe anything new? No, I said quickly. She said I need to keep doing exactly what I am doing. Whatever we have been doing, it is barely keeping the baby alive. A flicker of a smile crossed his lips before he clamped it down. Good. Good. That means the nutrition plan is working. It means we just need to double down on your health. He guided me to the sofa, fluffing a pillow behind my back, with the attentiveness of a nurse. You sit here, relax. Do not think about work. Do not think about the firm. I am going to make you your tonic. You missed your morning dose because of the appointment. My stomach turned. He was going to feed me the poison right now, right to my face. I just want water. Jamal, I said weaky. No, baby. You need the vitamins, he insisted, already walking toward the open concept kitchen. The kale and the iron are essential. Dr. Stevens said to keep doing what we are doing right. I am not going to let you wither away. I watched him from the couch. The kitchen island was marble, a slab I had hand-picked. He stood there, back turned to me, and I saw him reach into the upper cabinet where he kept his protein powders. But instead of the large tub, I saw his hand dip into a small, unmarked tin he kept behind the spices. He took a pinch of white powder and dropped it into the blender along with the spinach and apple juice. The sound of the blender roared to life, drowning out the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. He was so casual about it. That was what terrified me the most. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was poisoning his pregnant wife with the same casual energy he used to butter toast. It was routine for him. How long had this been going on? Weeks, months? Had my fatigue and morning sickness been side effects of the drug all along? He poured the thick green sludge into a tall glass and walked back over to me. Here you go, sweetheart. Drink it all down. For our son or daughter. He handed me the glass. It was cold condensation dripping onto my hand. The smell of raw kale was overpowering, masking whatever bitterness lay beneath. Thanks, babe, I said, bringing the glass to my lips. I feigned a sip, letting the liquid touch my closed lips, but not letting a drop enter my mouth. I pulled away and made a face. Ugh, it is so thick today. It is the extra iron, he said soothingly, sitting on the coffee table in front of me, watching me like a hawk. Just chug it. It is better if you do it fast. My phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced down. It was a notification from my bank app, a standard alert I had set up for any transaction over $500. But I saw Jamal's eyes dart to the screen. Is that work? He asked, his tone sharpening. I don't know, I said, putting the glass down on the coaster. Can you check my bag? I think I left my ID in the side pocket at the clinic. Jamal hesitated. He looked at the drink, then at me, then at the purse by the door. I will check, he said, standing up. But drink that before it gets warm. It separates if you let it sit. As soon as his back was turned, I moved with a speed that would have shocked him. I grabbed the glass and looked around. The potted plant in the corner was too far. The sink was too risky. He might see the residue. Then I saw it. The bonsai tree. It was a $2,000 juniper bonsai, sitting on the side table next to the sofa. It was Jamal's pride and joy. He spent hours pruning it with tiny scissors, bragging to his friends about the discipline it took to maintain. It was his baby. I didn't hesitate. I dumped the entire contents of the smoothie into the soil of the bonsai. The thick green liquid disappeared quickly into the dark earth and moss. I wiped the rim of the glass with my thumb to make it look used and set the empty glass back on the coaster, just as Jamal turned around holding my ID. "Found it," he said, walking back. "You really need to be more careful, Dom. Pregnancy brain is real." He stopped when he saw the empty glass. His eyebrows shot up. "Whoa, you downed that fast." "I told you." I smiled weakly, wiping a fake green mustache from my lip. "I am doing it for the baby." "Good girl," he said, picking up the glass and inspecting the bottom. He looked satisfied. "See, you are getting stronger already." He took the glass to the kitchen to rinse it out immediately. He never washed dishes immediately. He was destroying the evidence. When he came back, his demeanor had shifted. He wasn't just the concerned husband anymore. He was the businessman. He sat down next to me, taking my hand. His palms were sweaty. "Babe, while you were resting, I was thinking about what Dr. Stevens said. About stress." I hummed, closing my eyes, pretending to drift off. "You cannot be worrying about the portfolio right now," he said softly. "The market is volatile. I saw you checking the bank alerts. You do not need that cortisol in your system. It is poison for the baby." I opened one eye. "What are you suggesting, Jamal?" "I think we should sign that limited power of attorney we talked about last year," he said, his voice level and practiced. "Just for the duration of the pregnancy. It would let me handle the day-to-day transfers, sign off on the real estate maintenance, and deal with the brokers so you do not have to. I just want to take the burden off your shoulders." I felt a cold rage bubble up in my chest. He didn't just want to kill me. He wanted to liquidate me first. If I signed that paper, he could drain my personal accounts, sell my stocks, and move everything to an offshore account before my body was even cold. "That makes sense," I said slowly, watching hope flare in his eyes. "Great," he said, reaching under the coffee table. "I actually printed a draft just in case. We can just sign it now and I will get Dante to notarize it later." He had it ready. He had the death warrant ready under the coffee table. I reached out and took the paper. My hand trembled, and for once I didn't have to fake it. I looked at the legal jargon. It wasn't limited. It was a general power of attorney. It gave him full control. "I need to read this over, Jamal," I said, folding the paper and placing it under my thigh. "You know how I am. I cannot sign anything without reviewing the clauses. It is the auditor in me." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Dom, do you not trust me? This is for your health. Why do you have to make everything a transaction?" "It is not a transaction, it is my nature," I countered, softening my voice. "If I just sign it blindly, I will stress about what I might have missed. That defeats the purpose, right? Let me look at it tonight after dinner. I will sign it in the morning." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for any sign of resistance. I kept my face open, exhausted and compliant. Finally, he blinked. "Okay," he said, standing up abruptly. "Tomorrow morning." "But Dom, seriously, let me lead. You need to stop trying to control everything." I watched him walk away to his home office. Let him lead. He wanted to lead me right off a cliff. That night was the longest of my life. We lay in our king-sized bed, the Egyptian cotton sheets feeling like a shroud. Jamal fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even unburdened by conscience. I lay on the very edge of the mattress, my back to him, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. Every time he shifted in his sleep, my heart hammered. I kept thinking, what if he wakes up? What if he decides the poison is too slow? What if he sees the pillow over my face and takes an opportunity? I slid my hand under my pillow, wrapping my fingers around the cold steel of the letter opener I had swiped from the hallway desk. It wasn't much, but it was something. I listened to the wind howling off Lake Michigan, rattling the window panes. In the silence of the room, the truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. The man snoring softly behind me, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, was a monster. He had looked me in the eye today, smiled, and handed me a glass of death. I thought about the bonsai tree in the living room. By tomorrow morning, its leaves would begin to brown. Its roots would shrivel. It would be the first casualty of this war. But it wouldn't be the last. My mind began to race, the gears of my forensic training grinding into motion. He wanted control of the money, fine. I would give him a trail to follow. He wanted to use legal documents to trap me. I would bury him in paperwork so deep he wouldn't find his way out until he was in a prison cell. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. I was visualizing the spreadsheet of our lives. I was moving columns, hiding assets, and highlighting liabilities. Jamal thought I was the liability. He didn't know that I was the auditor. And the audit had just begun. I wouldn't just divorce him. I wouldn't just leave. I was going to let him think he was winning right up until the moment I slammed the gavel down. Tomorrow, the actress would take the stage again. But tonight, the strategist was plotting the third act. And in my version of the script, the villain doesn't get a monologue. He gets a sentence. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. It sounded less like a dinner chime and more like the opening bell of a boxing match. I stood in front of the hallway mirror for one last second, smoothing down my maternity dress. It was silk, expensive, and draped perfectly over my bump, acting as a shield for the child I was now protecting with my life. I checked my smile. It didn't reach my eyes, but it didn't have to. It just had to be convincing enough to fool a fool. And my brother-in-law Dante was definitely a fool. His wife Brittany, however, was something far more dangerous. Jamal opened the door before I could reach it. I hung back in the hallway watching the performance begin. "Hey brother," Jamal boomed, embracing Dante. Dante was younger, softer around the edges, and always looked like he was wearing clothes that were slightly too big for him. He worked a mid-level IT job that I knew Jamal secretly looked down on. And there she was, Brittany. She breezed in past Dante like she owned the place, her heels clicking loudly on my marble floors. She was wearing a white dress that looked dangerously close to something a bride would wear to a rehearsal dinner. It was a choice. Everything with Brittany was a choice. She spotted Jamal and gave him a hug that lingered just a second too long, her hands pressing flat against his back. "Oh, Jamal, you look exhausted," she cooed, pulling back and scanning his face. "You work too hard for this family." She finally turned to me. Her blue eyes did that thing where they scanned me from head to toe, searching for a flaw, a loose thread, a chip in my armor. "Dominique," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. "You look huge. Is it twins? Are you sure it is not twins?" "I read an article that said IVF babies sometimes split late. It is not IVF, Brittany," I said, keeping my voice level. "And it is just one healthy baby, right natural." She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Well, you are glowing. Or maybe that is just the humidity in here. It feels a little stuffy, doesn't it?" She walked past me into the living room without waiting for an answer. I watched her go. This was the woman my brother-in-law had married 2 years ago. From the moment she entered the family, she had made it her mission to undermine me. She was a stay-at-home wife who constantly made passive-aggressive comments about my career, implying that a woman who worked as much as I did couldn't possibly keep a happy home. Tonight, however, I sensed a different energy from her. It wasn't just jealousy, it was anticipation. I went into the kitchen to finish plating the appetizers. I had made a spicy seafood gumbo, a recipe passed down from my grandmother in Louisiana. The rich, savory smell filled the house. Jamal came in behind me, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Be nice to her tonight, Dom," he whispered, leaning close. "Dante is having a hard time at work. Brittany is stressed. Just keep the peace. Keep the peace." That was rich coming from the man who had tried to feed me an abortion cocktail at breakfast. I am always nice, Jamal, I said, stirring the pot. We moved to the dining room. I had set the table with my good china, the gold-rimmed plates I bought after my first big promotion. Brittany was already seated, not in her usual spot, but at the head of the table opposite Jamal. My spot. "Oh, sorry," she said, not moving an inch. "I just sat down without thinking. The lighting is better here for my Instagram story. You do not mind sitting on the side, do you? Dom, you need room to stretch your legs anyway." "It is fine," I said, taking the side chair. It was a power move, plain and simple. She was physically positioning herself as the matriarch of my house. Dante sat opposite me, looking nervous. "So how is the business, Dom? Caught any bad guys lately?" I smiled at him. Dante was harmless, just easily manipulated. "Business is booming, Dante. People always think they can hide money. They think if they move it offshore or put it in a shell company, it disappears. But money always leaves a trail. It is like a footprint in wet cement. It never really goes away." I saw Jamal stiffen in his chair. He took a long swig of his beer. Brittany jumped in, changing the subject. "Well, speaking of trails, I hope this gumbo is not too heavy. I was telling Dante on the way over that we need to watch our sodium." She peered into her bowl, stirring the dark roux with her spoon, like she was examining toxic waste. "It smells very strong," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You know, Dominique, I read that spicy food can be really bad for the baby's heart rate, and all this salt. It is terrible for blood pressure, especially for, you know, your demographic. Heart disease runs high in the community, doesn't it?" The room went silent. The microaggression hung in the air, thick and ugly. She wasn't talking about my family history, she was talking about my race. "My blood pressure is perfect, Brittany," I said, staring her down. "And the spices are distinct. It is called flavor. You should try it sometime." Jamal let out a nervous chuckle. "Brittany just cares about health, Dom. She is a yoga instructor after all. She knows about the body. She is an uncertified yoga instructor who teaches 2 classes a week at the community center," I thought, but I kept my mouth shut. Brittany smiled, victorious that Jamal had defended her. "I am just saying, we want the baby to be healthy. We do not want any complications." She emphasized the word complications with a look that sent a shiver down my spine. She knew. She knew about the plan. After the appetizer, Brittany excused herself to go to the restroom. But she didn't go to the powder room in the hallway. I heard her heels clicking towards the living room, towards my private study. I stood up. "Let me just check on the main course." I followed her quietly. I found her in the living room, standing in front of my art collection. I have 3 original pieces by Basquiat and a few modern sculptures that are worth more than the house she and Dante rent. She was running her hand over a bronze sculpture, her fingers tracing the curves with a look of pure, unadulterated greed. She didn't hear me approach. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" I said. She jumped, pulling her hand back. "Oh, you scared me. I was just admiring it. It must be nice to spend money on things like this." "It is an investment," I said, walking over to stand beside her. She turned to me, her eyes wide and innocent, but there was a shark swimming behind them. "You know, Dom, Dante and I were talking. If something, God forbid, if something happened to you during the birth." I stared at her. "Excuse me." "Well, Jamal said you are high risk," she continued, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "Childbirth is so dangerous. If you did not make it, and the baby did not make it, Jamal would be all alone in this big house with all these things. He would not know what to do with them. He is not really an art person." She reached out and touched the sculpture again. "I guess as family, Dante and I would have to step in and help him manage all this," she said. "I would hate to see these beautiful things sold off to strangers. I would probably take this one. It would look great in our foyer." My blood ran cold. She was not just asking a hypothetical question. She was staking a claim. She was picking out my furniture for her new life in my house. I took a step closer to her, invading her personal space. I plan on living a very long time, Brittany. And this sculpture? It is entailed. If I die, it goes to a museum, not to family. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before plastering back on. Oh, sure. Of course. I'm just being practical. We all have to think about the worst-case scenario. We went back to the dinner table. The tension was so thick I could hardly breathe. Jamal was refilling wine glasses, his face flushed. He was drinking too much. That was good. When he drank, he got sloppy. I brought out the main course, a roast chicken with vegetables. As I sat down, I noticed Brittany watching me. She wasn't eating. She was fidgeting with her water glass, her eyes darting between me and Jamal. Is the soup too spicy for you? Britt, Jamal asked, trying to break the silence. No, it is fine, she said. Actually, can you pass the salt, Dom? It is over by your elbow. I reached for the salt shaker. At the same moment, Brittany reached across the table ostensibly for the pepper, but her arm moved with a strange, jerky speed. Her elbow slammed into the tureen of hot gumbo that was sitting near my plate. It happened in slow motion. The heavy ceramic bowl tipped. The dark boiling liquid cascaded over the edge of the table. Watch out, Dante yelled, but it was too late. The hot soup splashed directly onto my stomach. I screamed. The pain was instant and searing. The heat soaked through my silk dress, scalding the skin of my baby bump. I scrambled back, knocking my chair over frantically, trying to pull the fabric away from my skin. Oh my God, Brittany shrieked. She jumped up, but she didn't look at me. She looked down at her white dress. A few drops of the gumbo had splattered onto her hem. My dress, she wailed. This is dry clean, only Jamal get a towel. It is staining. I was standing there clutching my burning stomach, tears springing to my eyes from the pain. Jamal, help me, I gasped. It is burning. Jamal shot out of his chair. He grabbed the linen napkin from his lap. He looked at me, saw me holding my stomach, saw the red, angry skin beginning to blister through the wet silk. Then he looked at Brittany, who was frantically dabbing at the tiny spot on her hem, making a scene. Here, let me get that, Jamal said, rushing to Brittany's side. He dropped to his knees in front of her, using the napkin to vigorously rub the spot on her dress. Do not rub it in, Britt. You have to blot it. Here, let me get some club soda. I stood frozen. The pain in my abdomen was throbbing, but the pain in my chest was worse. My husband was on his knees cleaning a spot of soup off his sister-in-law's dress, while his pregnant wife stood 3 feet away with second-degree burns on her stomach. Dante was the only one who moved towards me. Dom, are you okay? Do you need ice? I held up a hand to stop him. I am fine, I said, my voice deadly calm. I looked at Jamal. He was still focused on Brittany. She was looking down at him, her hand resting on his shoulder, her fingers curling slightly into the fabric of his shirt. It wasn't the touch of a sister-in-law. It was possessive. It was intimate. Jamal looked up at her, and for a second, the rest of the room disappeared for them. He gave her a look of such intensity, such raw hunger, that I felt like I had walked in on them in bed. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the insurance fraud. They were sleeping together. The realization hit me harder than the hot soup, the late nights at the office, the sudden interest in Dante's family, the way Brittany knew so much about our finances. They weren't just partners in crime, they were lovers. Brittany caught me watching them. Over Jamal's head, she locked eyes with me. She didn't look sorry. She smiled. A tiny, cruel smirk that said, I win. I turned around and walked out of the dining room. Where are you going? Jamal called out, finally remembering I existed. To change, I said, without looking back. Enjoy your dinner. I walked up the stairs, my stomach burning, my heart pounding. I went into the bathroom and peeled the ruined silk dress off my body. The skin on my belly was angry red, but not blistered badly. The baby kicked a strong, solid thump against my ribs, as if to say, I am still here, Mom. We are still here. I looked in the mirror. I saw the woman Dr. Stevens had warned. I saw the woman who had been betrayed by everyone she trusted. But I also saw the forensic accountant who had just found the smoking gun. Adultery. In the state of Illinois, adultery could impact the divorce settlement if it involved the dissipation of marital assets. And if Jamal was spending our money on Brittany, if he was buying her dresses or jewelry or paying her rent, that was dissipation. I applied burn cream to my stomach with trembling hands. Downstairs, I could hear them laughing. Brittany's high-pitched giggle echoed up the stairwell. They thought they had won. They thought I was just the clumsy pregnant wife who ruined dinner. I grabbed my phone. I needed to see exactly how deep this affair went. I needed dates. I needed hotel receipts. And I knew exactly where to find them. Jamal thought he was smart deleting his texts, but he forgot that our Easy Pass account for the toll roads tracked everywhere the car went. And looking at the shared calendar, I bet I would find a lot of business trips that matched up with trips to local hotels. I put on a fresh robe and sat on the edge of the bathtub. The tears finally came hot and fast, but I wiped them away angrily. No more tears, not for him, not for her. They wanted a show, they wanted a tragedy. Fine, I would give them a tragedy, but it wouldn't be mine. I opened my laptop and logged into the toll road database. I started cross-referencing dates. The game had just changed. It wasn't just murder anymore, it was a love triangle. And in a triangle, one side always has to break. I was going to make sure that when it snapped, it took both of them down with it. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic wet snoring coming from the man passed out in our king-sized bed. Jamal had finished 3/4 of a bottle of bourbon after dinner, drowning whatever flicker of conscience he might have had left, or perhaps celebrating the successful performance he and Brittany had put on downstairs. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom watching him. In the moonlight, he looked peaceful, almost innocent, the same man I had fallen in love with 5 years ago. But I wasn't looking at him with the eyes of a wife anymore. I was looking at him with the eyes of an auditor staring at a fraudulent ledger. I waited another 10 minutes just to be sure he was in a deep sleep before I moved. I didn't go to him. I went to the walk-in closet and reached to the very back of the top shelf behind my winter coats. I pulled out a small, nondescript black case. This was my work kit, my emergency forensic toolkit. Inside was a high-speed USB drive loaded with extraction software, a keylogger, and a brute-force password cracker. I usually reserved these tools for corporate executives trying to hide embezzlement schemes, but tonight the target was domestic. I crept downstairs to Jamal's home office. The room smelled of his cologne and the lingering scent of deceit. His laptop, a sleek top-of-the-line model he claimed he needed for his day trading, sat on the mahogany desk. I sat down and opened the lid. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue light over my hands. It asked for a password. I didn't even flinch. Jamal was arrogant, and arrogant men are sloppy with their security. I plugged in my USB drive and let the software run. It took less than 3 minutes to bypass his security. He hadn't even bothered with two-factor authentication. I was in. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I started with the obvious: his email, his banking apps. He had always told me his money was tied up in cryptocurrency, that the market was volatile, but he was holding on to Bitcoin and Ethereum for our future. He claimed our liquidity issues were temporary, just growing pains of a visionary investor. I opened his brokerage accounts. Zero. There was no Bitcoin. There was no Ethereum. The trading app hadn't been active in 6 months. The graphs were flat lines. I felt a cold sneer curl my lip. He wasn't a visionary, he was broke. But where was the money going? We had a joint account for bills, and I contributed 70% of our household income. I pulled up the transfer history of our joint checking account. Every month, there were withdrawals labeled simply as consulting fees or business development. They ranged from $2,000 to $5,000. To the untrained eye, they looked legitimate. But I don't have an untrained eye. I traced the routing numbers. They weren't going to a consulting firm. They were being funneled through a shell company in Delaware, and from there bounced to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I tracked the final destination. The account was held under the name J&B Future Fund. J&B. I sat back in the leather chair, the leather squeaking beneath me. It was so transparent it was insulting. Jamal and Brittany. They weren't just stealing from me. They were building a nest egg for their life after I was gone. They were funding their future with my blood money. I dug deeper into the J&B entity documents which he had foolishly saved in a hidden folder named Tax Docs 2023. The incorporation papers listed two beneficiaries, Jamal Jenkins and Brittany Jenkins. She was listed as his partner, not his sister-in-law, his partner. I needed more than just bank transfers. I needed tangible proof of dissipation of assets. I needed to prove he was spending marital funds on his mistress. I opened his credit card statements, the ones he had gone paperless on, so I would never see the mail. I scrolled through months of transactions, expensive dinners at steakhouses I had never been to, hotel stays at the Four Seasons downtown on nights he said he was working late, spa days for two. And then I saw it. The invoice that made the breath catch in my throat. It was a receipt from a high-end jeweler in the Gold Coast district, a receipt for $50,000. The item description read, 2-carat solitaire diamond ring platinum band, custom engraving. The date of purchase was October 12th, my birthday. I closed my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. On my birthday last year, Jamal had come home empty-handed, looking sorrowful. He told me his liquidity was tied up, that he felt terrible. He couldn't get me the gift I deserved, but promised he would make it up to me when his crypto investments hit. I had hugged him. I had told him it didn't matter, that having him was enough. I had cooked my own birthday dinner while he sat at the table and let me comfort him about his financial stress. And on that very same day, he had walked into a jeweler and dropped $50,000 of our money on a ring for his brother's wife. My mind flashed back to dinner tonight. I remembered the way Brittany had waved her hand around, the way the light caught a diamond on her right hand. She had claimed it was a family heirloom from her grandmother. It wasn't an heirloom, it was my birthday present. It was my money on her finger. I printed the invoice to a PDF and saved it to my secure cloud drive. I was building a file that would not only grant me a divorce, but would leave him destitute. But the financial betrayal was only half the story. I needed to know the timeline. I needed to know the plan. I minimized the browser and opened the hidden applications folder. I found what I was looking for, an encrypted messaging app called Signal. It is the preferred tool for criminals and cheaters. He had it set to delete messages every 24 hours, but again he was sloppy. He hadn't cleared the archived chats from the cloud backup. I restored the history and clicked on the contact named simply B. The conversation that scrolled across the screen was vile. It was worse than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just a love affair. It was a conspiracy. Reading their words was like touching something slimy. Jamal. She is still complaining about the taste of the smoothie. I had to add more apple juice to mask the bitterness. Brittany. Just make sure she drinks it all. We are running out of time. Dante is starting to ask why I am gaining weight. I can't hide it with loose dresses forever. I froze. I reread the message. I can't hide it with loose dresses forever. Brittany wasn't just getting fat from stress eating. She was pregnant. I scrolled down, my hands trembling so hard I could barely control the trackpad. Jamal, be patient, baby. The doctor says her levels are spiking. It won't be long now. Once the hemorrhage starts, nature takes its course. And with the DNR signed, we just have to wait for the ambulance to be a little slow. Brittany. I hate waiting. I hate seeing her in your house. I hate seeing her touch my furniture. I want her gone, Jamal. I want us to be a real family. Me, you, and our son. Our son. The air left the room. Brittany was pregnant with Jamal's child. That was why they were desperate. That was why they had accelerated the poisoning. They needed me dead before Brittany started showing so Jamal could play the grieving widower for a few months before miraculously finding comfort in the arms of his sister-in-law. It was a replacement strategy. They were going to replace me, my baby, and my life with their twisted version of a happy family. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. This wasn't the time for grief. This was the time for evidence. I took screenshots of every single message. I screenshotted the dates, the timestamps, the admissions of guilt. Once the hemorrhage starts. That line alone was enough to put them both away for conspiracy to commit murder. I found another exchange from 2 days ago. Brittany, did you get the nursery ready, Jamal? Not yet. I can't clear out her office until she is, you know. But I measured the room. It is perfect for the crib we looked at. Brittany, good. Because I am not raising our son in that tacky guest room. He deserves the master suite. They were already measuring my office for their baby's nursery, my office. The room where I had built my career, where I had spent countless nights auditing billionaires and fighting fraud. They were going to turn it into a shrine for their adultery. I had seen enough. I ejected my USB drive and carefully wiped the recent activity log on his computer so he wouldn't know I had been there. I closed the laptop exactly as I had found it, adjusting the angle to the millimeter. I stood up, clutching the USB drive in my hand. It felt hot against my palm. This tiny piece of plastic held the power to destroy them. But I wasn't going to turn it over to the police yet. Not tonight. The auditor in me knew that the most devastating blow isn't just catching the thief. It is waiting until they have spent the money they stole and then calling in the debt. I walked back upstairs, the wooden steps cool under my bare feet. I slipped back into bed next to Jamal. He shifted in his sleep, his arm flopping over to drape across my waist. It took everything in me not to recoil. I let his heavy, traitorous arm rest there. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to think he was the one in control. I lay there in the dark, listening to the man who wanted me dead breathe beside me. I thought about Brittany sleeping a few miles away in the bed she shared with Dante, dreaming of my house and my life. They thought they were the authors of this story. They thought I was just a character to be written out in the second act. But they forgot one thing. I am the one who balances the books. And tomorrow I was going to start calling in the loans. The interest on this betrayal was going to be astronomical. Brittany was pregnant. That was the variable I hadn't accounted for, but now that I knew it was the weapon I would use, a gender reveal party. The idea sparked in my mind, dark and brilliant. Jamal loved a spectacle. Brittany loved being the center of attention. I would give them a party they would never forget. I closed my eyes, visualizing the spreadsheet of my revenge, the assets, my intelligence, my forensic evidence, my will to survive. The liabilities: a cheating husband, a murderous sister-in-law, a fake pregnancy. The bottom line was clear. They were going to be bankrupt in every sense of the word. I drifted off to sleep with a smile on my face, the first genuine smile I had worn all day. The hunt was over. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the cheese to be taken. The house was finally quiet, but my mind was screaming. After finding the digital evidence of their affair and the murder plot, I knew I could not just go back to sleep. I needed to neutralize the weapon. I knew Jamal kept his gym supplements in the lower cabinet of the kitchen island, a place he claimed was his designated health zone. I crept downstairs, the marble floor cold against my bare feet, moving like a ghost in my own home. I opened the cabinet door slowly, wincing at the slight squeak of the hinge. There it was. The massive tub of whey protein he worshipped like an idol. But I knew the poison was not mixed into the whole tub. That would be too dilute. He was dosing me specifically. I dug my hand into the powder, feeling around until my fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. I pulled out a small, unmarked pill bottle buried deep in the vanilla-scented dust. I opened it. Inside was a white powder, finely ground. Misoprostol. I took a small sample and sealed it in a Ziploc bag to give to Dr. Stevens for testing, just to be absolutely sure. Then I went to the medicine cabinet in the guest bathroom. I found a bottle of extra-strength laxatives, the kind meant for severe constipation, and a bottle of natural sleep aids. I crushed them both in a mortar and pestle until they were a fine white dust, identical in texture to the poison. I poured my mixture into his hidden bottle, buried it back in the protein tub, and washed the mortar 3 times to remove any trace. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to his breathing, knowing that tomorrow the game would change. He thought he was the predator administering death in a glass. He had no idea he was about to become the patient. The next morning, the sun streamed into the kitchen, mocking the darkness of our reality. Jamal was already up whistling a tune as the blender whirred. It was a sickening sound. The sound of him preparing what he thought was my execution. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, turning off the blender. He poured the green liquid into 2 glasses, one for him which was just spinach and protein, one for me which contained the special additive from the buried bottle. He didn't know the additive had changed. He thought he was handing me a miscarriage. In reality, he was handing me a cocktail of magnesium citrate and melatonin. "Here you go, babe," he said, placing my glass on the counter. "Drink up." I walked over, feigning grogginess. "Oh, Jamal, look at that bird outside," I said, pointing to the window behind him. "Is that a cardinal?" Jamal turned. "Where I do not see it." In that split second, my hand moved. I switched the glasses. It was a sleight of hand I had practiced in my head 1,000 times since I woke up. He turned back. "Must have flown away," he said, picking up the glass that was originally meant for me. I picked up his glass. "Cheers to a healthy baby," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Cheers." He smiled and he drank. He drank deep, swallowing the entire glass in 3 large gulps. He wiped his mouth, looking satisfied. He had just ingested a massive dose of laxatives meant to clear out a system in minutes, mixed with enough sedative to knock out a horse. I pretended to sip mine, then poured it down the sink when he went to tie his shoes. 20 minutes later, we were in the living room. Jamal was putting on his jacket, getting ready for a meeting with his imaginary investors. Suddenly, he froze. A look of absolute confusion crossed his face. His stomach let out a gurgle so loud it echoed off the walls. "You okay, babe?" I asked, keeping my face perfectly innocent. "Yeah, He grimaced, clutching his abdomen. "I just got a weird cramp." He took a step towards the door and then stopped. His eyes went wide. The color drained from his face. The laxative was fast-acting. I need to go," he stammered, dropping his briefcase. He sprinted for the downstairs bathroom. The door slammed, and moments later, the sounds of absolute intestinal destruction filled the hallway. I stood there sipping my coffee, listening to the man who tried to kill me suffer the most humiliating morning of his life. "Dom," he yelled through the door, his voice strained and panicked. "Dom, bring me some water. I feel dizzy. That would be the sedatives kicking in." I walked to the door. "Oh no, Jamal. Do you think it was the sushi we ordered last week? Or maybe a stomach bug? You sound terrible. I feel weak," he moaned. "I will get you some water," I said. "You just stay in there. Don't worry about your meeting. I will text them and cancel." I didn't text anyone. I grabbed my purse and keys. "I have to run to the pharmacy to get you some medicine, honey," I yelled. "I will be back soon." I left him there, trapped in the bathroom, sick, dizzy, and helpless. It was a petty victory, but it bought me time. I drove straight past the pharmacy and headed for the suburbs. I had a meeting that was far more important than buying Pepto-Bismol. I pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript coffee shop in Oak Park, 40 minutes away from the city. Sitting in the back corner booth was Mr. Vance, my personal estate lawyer. He was a man of few words, and even fewer smiles, which was exactly why I liked him. He had been my father's lawyer, and he was the only person on earth who knew the true extent of my net worth. "Dominique," he said, standing up to shake my hand. You look determined. I sat down and slid a manila envelope across the table. It contained the evidence of the forgery, the poisoning report from Dr. Stevens, and the chat logs I had extracted last night. We need to make a change to the estate plan, Mr. Vance. Today. He opened the envelope, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. Good Lord. Dominique, this is grounds for immediate arrest. Why aren't we at the police station? Because he is not done yet, I said coldly. And neither am I. If I arrest him now, he fights it. He claims I am crazy. He uses my money to pay for his defense. I need him to be broke before he goes to jail. I took a sip of black coffee. I want to set up an irrevocable trust. Mr. Vance nodded slowly. Okay. Who is the beneficiary? The baby. Technically, yes, I said. But I want a specific clause, a poison pill clause. If I die under suspicious circumstances, or if I die before the divorce is finalized, 100% of my assets, including the house, the portfolio, and the life insurance payout, will bypass Jamal completely and go where he asked, pen hovering over his notepad. To the Save the Strays Foundation, I said. The charity for abandoned dogs and cats. Mr. Vance looked up, his glasses sliding down his nose. You want to leave $5 million to cats? I want to ensure that if Jamal succeeds in killing me, he doesn't get a penthouse. He gets to watch my fortune buy kibble for stray animals while he rots in prison. I want him to know that I value a feral cat more than I value him. He scribbled furiously. And the baby? My sister is the guardian. The trust will pay out to the child only when they turn 25, provided Jamal has no access to it. If he tries to challenge it, the charity gets everything. It is aggressive, Mr. Vance warned. And once you sign this, it is done. You cannot undo an irrevocable trust easily. You are locking your own money away. I signed the papers he pushed towards me without hesitation. My signature was sharp, angular, and final. I am not locking it away, Mr. Vance. I am building a fortress. He organized the papers, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and fear. Dominique, be careful. You are playing a dangerous game with a desperate man. If he finds out you have cut him off, he might stop using poison and start using something faster. Like a gun. Or the stairs. I stood up, adjusting my coat. I thought about Jamal curled up on the bathroom floor, weak and humiliated. I thought about Brittany measuring my office for her nursery. They thought they were the predators because they had the element of surprise, but they had made the fatal mistake of underestimating their prey. Let him try, I said, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. He thinks I am the gazelle, Mr. Vance. He thinks he is hunting a wounded animal. I put on my sunglasses, hiding the fire in my eyes. But he is wrong. I am not the prey. I am the hunter. And I just set the bait. The decision to stage my own medical emergency was not one I took lightly. It was the final variable in the equation, the last audit before I closed the file on my marriage forever. I needed to know with absolute certainty that there was no shred of humanity left in Jamal Jenkins. I needed to know if, when faced with the actual sight of his pregnant wife dying on his floor, he would panic and call for help, or if he would let nature take its course. I had the poison report, I had the chat logs, but I needed the visual confirmation. I needed to see the killer in his eyes. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 days after I had switched his supplements. Jamal was still recovering from his gastrointestinal nightmare, looking pale and irritable, but he was back to his old tricks. He had handed me a glass of water earlier with a little too much insistence, watching me drink it. I had switched the glass again, of course, pouring the tainted water into a vase of hydrangeas that were already starting to wilt, but I pretended I had consumed every drop. Now I sat on the sofa, clutching my chest, waiting for the right moment. Jamal was in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone, likely texting Brittany. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and then I pressed the hidden SOS button on my smartwatch. I had programmed it to bypass 911 and go directly to a private ambulance service I had on retainer through my firm, with a priority code that meant immediate dispatch. They would be here in less than 4 minutes. I let out a gasp, loud and ragged. I stood up, knocked over a stack of magazines on the coffee table to create a commotion, and then I crumpled to the floor. I didn't fall gently like they do in the movies. I let my body hit the rug with a heavy, dead-weight thud. I curled on my side, clutching my heart, my eyes fluttering but remaining open just a slit so I could see everything. Jamal dropped his phone on the counter. The noise startled him. He rushed into the living room, his socks sliding on the hardwood. "Dominique," he called out. His voice wasn't scared. It was curious. He stood over me. From my vantage point on the floor, he looked like a giant. I let out a low moan, my hand reaching out towards him, trembling. "Jamal. Chest. Hurts." I wheezed, letting my head loll back onto the carpet. He didn't kneel. He didn't check my pulse. He didn't grab my hand. He took a step back. He looked at me with a cold, clinical detachment, like a mechanic looking at a car that had finally broken down exactly as predicted. He pulled his phone from his pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from the fake attack, but from the adrenaline of the test. "Call 911. I screamed internally. "Call them. Prove me wrong. Be the man I thought I married." He dialed. But he didn't dial 3 digits. He pressed a speed dial contact. I listened, my blood turning to ice in my veins. "She is down," Jamal whispered, turning his back to me slightly, but I could hear every word. "Yeah, just now. She grabbed her chest and fell. It looks like a heart attack. Or maybe the hemorrhage started internally." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. It was Brittany. I knew it was her. "No, she is still breathing," he said, glancing over his shoulder at me. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath until my lungs burned. "But she looks bad, Britt. Her eyes are rolled back." Another pause. Then the sentence that sealed his fate. The sentence that killed the last tiny, foolish part of me that still loved him. "Okay, I will wait. 10 minutes. You think that is enough?" "Yeah. If I call 911 now, they might save her. If I wait 10 minutes, it is just a tragedy." "Okay. I love you too. Hurry over here. I need a witness to say I was performing CPR." He hung up. He put the phone in his pocket and stood there watching me die. He actually checked his watch. He was timing my death. He was going to stand in our living room surrounded by our wedding photos and watch the mother of his child suffocate for 10 minutes so he could cash a check. The cruelty was so absolute, so breathtakingly evil, that I almost forgot to keep acting. I wanted to leap up and tear his eyes out, but I didn't have to wait 10 minutes. In the distance, the wail of a siren cut through the evening air. It started soft, then grew louder and louder, approaching with the speed of vengeance. Jamal froze. He looked toward the window. The lights of the ambulance were already flashing against the living room curtains, painting the walls in chaotic bursts of red and white. "What the hell?" he muttered. "Who called them?" He looked down at me, panic finally setting in. He realized he hadn't made the 911 call yet. If they walked in and found him standing over me doing nothing, he was finished. He dropped to his knees instantly. He grabbed my shoulders and started shaking me, shouting loudly for the benefit of the approaching paramedics. "Dominique, baby. Stay with me. Oh God, someone help!" He began performing chest compressions, but they were weak and pathetic. He was putting on a show. I stayed limp, letting him shake me. The front door burst open. I had left it unlocked earlier intentionally. "Paramedics. Where is the patient?" "In here!" Jamal screamed, his voice cracking with fake tears. "She just collapsed. I was just about to call you. Thank God you are here." I don't know what happened. The room swarmed with activity. Men in uniforms pushed Jamal aside. They put an oxygen mask over my face. One of them checked my vitals. I gave a subtle squeeze to the paramedic's hand, a signal we had agreed upon during my consultation with the private service. He nodded imperceptibly. "Pulse is thready. We need to move her now." They loaded me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me out, I saw Jamal standing by the fireplace. He wasn't looking at me with worry. He was looking at his phone, furiously typing. He was warning Brittany. The plan had been interrupted. The ride to the hospital was a blur of acting. I kept my eyes closed, letting the paramedics do their work. When we arrived at the emergency bay, Dr. Stevens was waiting. She looked fierce like a general on a battlefield. She took over immediately, barking orders at the nurses, steering my gurney into a private trauma room. Once the doors were closed and the nurses were dismissed, Dr. Stevens leaned over me. "You can open your eyes, Dominique. We are clear." I sat up, ripping the oxygen mask off my face. "Did you see him?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "Did you see that he didn't come in the ambulance?" "He is parking the car," Dr. Stevens said, checking my blood pressure for real this time. "Your pressure is through the roof, Dom. You need to calm down. This is dangerous." "He waited," I whispered. "He told her he was going to wait 10 minutes. He wanted me dead, Stevens." He checked his watch. Dr. Stevens gripped my hand. "Then let's make him wish he had succeeded. I am going to hook you up to the monitors. We will make it look like you had a severe cardiac event triggered by stress and unknown chemical factors. I will tell him you are in a coma for now. It will buy us time to record their reactions." She hooked me up to the machines. The steady beep, beep, beep filled the room. I lay back against the pillows, making myself look small and fragile. I focused on slowing my breathing, letting the exhaustion of the last few days wash over me. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. Dr. Stevens stepped forward, blocking their view of me. "Mr. Jenkins," she said gravely, "and Ms. Brittany. I assume you are here for moral support?" Jamal rushed in, looking disheveled. Brittany was right behind him, wearing a tracksuit and no makeup, playing the part of the concerned sister-in-law perfectly, except for the designer bag she refused to put down. "How is she?" Jamal asked breathlessly. "Is the baby okay?" Dr. Stevens sighed, looking at her clipboard. It was touch and go. She suffered a massive drop in blood pressure, followed by cardiac arrhythmia. If the ambulance hadn't arrived when it did, we would be having a very different conversation right now. I watched through my eyelashes. I saw Jamal's shoulders slump. It wasn't relief. It was the heavy, sagging posture of defeat. He looked at Brittany. Brittany bit her lip, her eyes narrowing. She looked at me lying in the bed, and for a second her mask slipped completely. She looked annoyed. She looked like someone who had just missed a flight. "But will she recover?" Brittany asked, her voice tight. "She is stable," Dr. Stevens said, "but she is unconscious. We are monitoring her for toxins. Her blood work is complicated. We have inducted a medical coma to protect the brain and the fetus." "Toxins," Jamal squeaked. "What kind of toxins?" "We are running a full toxicology panel." Dr. Stevens lied smoothly. "It could be food poisoning. It could be environmental. Or it could be something else. We will know in 24 hours. Jamal turned the color of old milk. He knew exactly what the panel would find if they actually ran it. "Can we see her?" he asked weakly. Briefly, Dr. Stevens stepped aside. They approached the bed. I felt Jamal's hand touch mine. His skin was cold and clammy. "Hey, baby," he whispered. "You are a fighter. You have to wake up." But his thumb was stroking my knuckles in a rhythmic, nervous pattern. He wasn't comforting me. He was comforting himself. Brittany stood at the foot of the bed. She didn't touch me. She crossed her arms over her chest. She looked at the monitor, watching the green line of my heartbeat. I could feel her hatred radiating like heat. She wanted that line to go flat. She had probably already spent the insurance money in her head. She had probably already picked out curtains for my bedroom. "We should go," Jamal Brittany said sharply. "We can't do anything here. We should go home and clean up. Get the house ready for when she comes back." I knew what cleanup meant. It meant destroying the evidence. It meant flushing the pills, scrubbing the blender, and deleting the chat logs. But they were too late. I had the pills, I had the logs, I had everything. Jamal hesitated. "I should stay." "No," Brittany insisted, grabbing his arm. "You look terrible. You are no good to her like this." Dr. Stevens will call us if anything changes. Right, doctor. We will call Dr. Stevens, agreed. Jamal pulled his hand away from mine. I felt a sudden lightness, as if a toxic sludge had been removed from my skin. Okay. Call me. Anytime. They walked out. As the door closed, I heard Brittany whisper, hiss, really? You said 10 minutes. You said you would handle it. I didn't think the ambulance would be that fast, Jamal hissed back. Their voices faded down the corridor. I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit only by the machines. Dr. Stevens looked at me. They are terrified, she said. They are going to go home and scrub that house top to bottom. Let them, I said, sitting up and pulling the IV tape off my hand. I don't need the physical evidence anymore. I have seen what I needed to see. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Where are you going? Dr. Stevens asked. You are supposed to be in a coma. I am checking out, I said. I have a party to plan, a party the gender reveal. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. It was a predator's smile. They want to know about the baby. I am going to tell them everything. I am going to invite everyone they know, his investors, her parents, my family, and I am going to reveal a lot more than just blue or pink. I walked to the closet where my clothes were stored. Dr. Stevens, I need you to release me against medical advice. Tell them I woke up confused and demanded to go home. Tell them I am hormonal and irrational. Play into their narrative that I am unstable. She nodded slowly. It will make them overconfident. Exactly, I said, zipping up my boots. They think they dodged a bullet tonight. They think they have a second chance to kill me. They will be sloppy. They will get careless. I grabbed my coat, but they don't know that the bullet already hit them. It is just a slow-moving one. And it is going to explode right in their faces on Saturday night. I walked out of the hospital room, leaving the beeping machines behind. I wasn't Dominique the victim anymore. I wasn't even Dominique the wife. I was the chief financial officer of Karma, and I was about to audit their souls. The hospital trap had worked perfectly. It had flushed them out. Now it was time for the extermination. The invitation said 2 in the afternoon, but I arrived at 2:15, fashionably late and armored in a designer maternity jumpsuit that cost more than the Honda Civic parked in Brittany's driveway. After my miraculous recovery from the hospital, Brittany had absolutely insisted on hosting my baby shower. She claimed that after my health scare, I needed to rest and let family take care of me. I knew the real reason, of course. She wanted to control the narrative. She wanted to parade me in front of her friends and my colleagues as the frail, sickly older mother who was barely hanging on while she played the energetic, youthful, and capable sister-in-law. I had offered to pay for a venue, perhaps the solarium at the Botanical Gardens, or a private room at the Peninsula, but Brittany had refused with a scoff. She said those places were too impersonal, and that a backyard barbecue was more authentic. Authentic was certainly one word for it. As I stepped out of my car, my heels sinking slightly into the uneven pavement of the sidewalk, I could already hear the bass of cheap speakers rattling the windows of her rental house. I walked around to the back gate, taking a deep breath to steel myself. The scene that greeted me was not just underwhelming, it was an insult crafted with precision. My friends, a collection of successful doctors, lawyers, and corporate executives, were standing awkwardly on patches of dying grass, holding red plastic cups filled with lukewarm boxed wine. Brittany had strung up a few limp streamers from the dollar store that were already tangling in the wind, and the tables were covered in thin plastic tablecloths that fluttered violently, threatening to blow away the paper plates of cold hot dogs and store-bought potato salad. It looked less like a celebration of a new life, and more like a hastily arranged fundraiser for a bleak cause. I saw my friend Chloe, a senior partner at a top law firm, looking down at her Manolo Blahniks with a mixture of horror and resignation as they sank into the mud. She caught my eye and mouthed, "Is this a joke?" I just smiled, a tight, practiced expression that conveyed everything she needed to know. I walked into the fray, greeting my guests with apologies disguised as gratitude. I am so glad you came, I told them, ignoring the smell of charcoal fluid that permeated the air. Brittany really wanted to do something intimate. Brittany emerged from the kitchen door wearing a tight pink dress that left nothing to the imagination, her hair teased high. She wasn't wearing an apron or looking like a hostess. She looked like she was trying to outshine the guest of honor. She clapped her hands, demanding attention. Everyone. The mother-to-be is finally here, she announced, her voice shrill. Let's get her a chair. We don't want her fainting again, do we? She guided me to a folding metal chair in the center of the yard, decorated with a single sad balloon. Sit, sit, she commanded, pushing on my shoulders. You look pale, Dominique. Are you sure you should be out of bed? I am feeling much better. Thank you, Brittany, I said, sitting down gingerly on the cold metal. The fresh air is good for me. Well, don't overdo it, she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. We all know how fragile your condition is. At your age, everything is a risk. My age, I am 35, not 80, but Brittany spoke as if I were geriatric. I saw the bristles of annoyance rise among my friends, but I kept my smile plastered on. I accepted a plate of food I had no intention of eating, scanning the area. Jamal was manning the grill, looking uncomfortable in an apron that said, "Kiss the cook." He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was probably wondering why I wasn't dead yet, or at least why I wasn't back in a coma. The tension between them was palpable, a vibrating string of frustration that they couldn't cut. The afternoon dragged on with excruciating slowness. Brittany organized games that were borderline humiliating, like guessing my waist measurement with a piece of string. When the string she cut was comically long, twice the size of my actual bump, she laughed the loudest. Oh, I just guessed big because of all the water retention, she chirped. You know how swollen you get. But the main event was the gift opening. Brittany made everyone gather around in a semicircle. She sat on a cooler next to me, acting as the master of ceremonies. We opened the gifts from my friends first. Crystal pacifiers, cashmere blankets, silver rattles from Tiffany's. With every expensive gift I unwrapped, Brittany's smile grew tighter. She tossed the high-end packaging into a trash bag with unnecessary force. Finally, there was only one gift left. It wasn't wrapped. It was covered by a gray tarp in the corner of the patio. Save the best for last, Brittany announced, standing up and strutting over to the tarp. Jamal and I wanted to get you something practical. Something that really speaks to where we are as a family. She whipped the tarp off with a flourish. Underneath stood a stroller. But it wasn't the Up-A-Baby Vista, or the Bugaboo I had on my registry. It was a rusted, faded blue stroller that looked like it had been dredged out of a canal from the 1990s. The fabric was stained with mysterious dark splotches, one of the wheels was bent at an odd angle, and the handle was wrapped in duct tape. A collective gasp went through the crowd. My friend Chloe actually covered her mouth. The silence was deafening. Brittany beamed, oblivious or perhaps reveling in the shock. I found this at a vintage market. She lied. It clearly came from a dumpster. They don't make them like this anymore. It has character. And I figured, why spend thousands on a new stroller when this one works just fine? She pushed it towards me. It let out a high-pitched metal-on-metal screech that sounded like a dying animal. The front wheel wobbled violently. Besides, she continued, her voice dropping to a register that was sickeningly sweet. With everything the doctor said about the risks and the uncertainty, I thought it was better not to invest in something permanent. You know, just in case. She let the sentence hang there. Just in case the baby dies. Just in case you die. I looked at the stroller. It was a death trap. A tetanus shot waiting to happen. If I put a baby in there, the frame would probably collapse. It was the ultimate symbol of how she viewed my child. Disposable. Temporary. Trash. I looked up at her. She was watching me, her eyes glittering with malice, daring me to make a scene. Daring me to be the ungrateful, snobby, rich sister-in-law who turned her nose up at a gift. I stood up slowly. I walked over to the stroller and ran my hand along the duct-taped handle. I felt the grit of rust under my fingertips. Thank you, Brittany, I said, my voice steady and clear. It is unforgettable. You are right. Old things do carry energy, and this certainly has a lot of history. I turned to the crowd, raising my voice slightly. It is a reminder that we should always cherish what we have, because you never know when things might fall apart. Brittany looked disappointed. She wanted me to cry or scream, but I wasn't done. I need to sit down, I said, feigning a sudden wave of dizziness. The excitement is a bit much. I sat back down on the metal chair, but this time I positioned myself closer to the main serving table where Brittany had set up her station. Her phone, her keys, and her purse were sitting right there on the plastic tablecloth. Can I get some water? I asked, looking at Jamal. While Jamal turned to the cooler and Brittany was busy basking in her cruelty, looking at the horrified faces of my friends with triumph, I made my move. I reached into my clutch for a tissue, and with it I palmed a small black disc. It was a high-powered listening device, smaller than a quarter with an adhesive back. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust the strap of my sandal under the table. In one fluid motion, I stuck the device to the underside of the plastic table right beneath where Brittany's phone was sitting. It was the perfect spot. It would pick up everything said at this table, and given Brittany's ego, this was where she would hold court once I left. Here is your water, Jamal said, handing me a cup. I took a sip. I think I need to go, I said, making my voice tremble. I am feeling very tired. The doctor warned me about overexertion. Brittany rolled her eyes but nodded. Yeah, you should go. You look terrible. We will clean up here. Don't worry about the gifts. We will bring them over later, especially the stroller. I stood up, signaling to my friends that it was okay to leave. I walked out of that backyard, leaving behind the rust, the cheap wine, and the toxicity. Jamal walked me to my car, playing the role of the dutiful husband for the audience. Get some rest, babe, he said, kissing my cheek. I will stay and help Brittany clean up. It is the least I can do since she worked so hard. I am sure you will, I said. You two make a great team. I got into my car and drove 2 blocks away. I pulled into a shaded side street and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. The image of that rusty stroller burned in my mind. They wanted my baby in a literal piece of garbage. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the receiver and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. I put them on and turned the dial. The static hissed for a second, and then crystal-clear audio flooded my ears. I heard the sound of plastic crunching, likely them clearing the plates. I heard Brittany's laugh. It was loud and uninhibited now that I was gone. Did you see her face? Brittany's voice cut through the air. She looked like she was going to vomit. It is unforgettable. Yeah, unforgettable, because it is trash, Dominique. I heard Jamal's voice lower, but distinct. You went too far with the just-in-case comment, Britt. Her friends were looking at you like you were crazy. Who cares about her stuck-up friends? Brittany snapped. They will all be at the funeral in a few weeks anyway. Did you switch the pills back? Yeah, Jamal said. I put the real stuff back in the protein powder this morning. She thinks she is safe because she came home from the hospital, but I doubled the dose in the mix. The next smoothie she drinks will be the last one. I gripped the steering wheel. He had repoisoned the supply. He was relentless. And what about the nursery? Brittany asked. I told you I will clear it out next week, Jamal said. Once she is gone, we can paint it blue. Blue, Brittany asked. Yeah, blue. For our son. I closed my eyes, listening to them plan their future on my grave. They were so confident. They were so sure that they were the authors of this story. They thought the stroller was the punchline. They didn't know it was the final nail in their coffin. I kept listening. You know, Jamal said, his voice dropping to a murmur. I was thinking. After the funeral, we should wait a respectable amount of time before we move you in. Maybe 3 months. 3 months? Brittany whined. I can't live in this rental for 3 months, Jamal. The roof leaks. And Dante is so annoying. He keeps trying to touch me. It makes me sick. Just hold on, Jamal soothed. We get the 5 million, we get the house, we get everything. We just have to stick to the plan. Saturday night, the gender reveal. What about it? That is when we announce it. Jamal said. Not the gender. We announce that you are moving in to help me with the baby. We plant the seed. So when you stay, nobody questions it. They were going to use my own party to soft launch their relationship. The audacity was breathtaking. I hit the record button on the receiver, ensuring every word was saved to the cloud. I had enough. I had the murder weapon, the motive, the conspiracy, and now the confession of the timeline. I took off the headphones. The silence in the car was heavy. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a demolition expert. They wanted to paint the nursery blue fine. I would give them something blue. I would give them the blue lights of a police cruiser. I put the car in drive. I was going home. I had a protein powder tub to secure for evidence, and I had a gender reveal party to finalize. I decided right then and there that I wouldn't just play a video at the party. I would make a speech. I would toast to the happy couple. And then I would burn their world to the ground. The engine of my car was running a low hum that barely masked the thumping of my own heart as I sat parked 2 streets away from the house that was currently hosting a celebration of my demise. I adjusted the volume on the receiver, pressing the headphones tighter against my ears until the world outside ceased to exist. All that remained was the static hiss of the connection and the voices of the 2 people I had trusted most in this world. The audio quality from the bug I had planted under the table was terrifyingly clear. I could hear the aggressive crunch of plastic trash bags being snapped open. I could hear the clatter of silverware being tossed carelessly into a bin. But mostly I could hear the smug, self-satisfied tone of Brittany's voice as she dismantled the last shreds of my dignity. God, did you see her face when I pulled the tarp off that stroller? Brittany laughed, the sound sharp and grating. She looked like she was going to throw up right there on the grass. I told you she was a snob, Jamal. She would rather let the kid walk than put it in something that isn't brand new. I heard Jamal sigh, the sound of a man who was weary but fully committed to the bit. You have to admit, Britt, the duct tape was a nice touch. Where did you even find that thing? By the dumpsters behind the strip mall, she replied breezily. I wiped off the worst of the grime, but I left the rust. It sends a message, don't you think? It tells her exactly what her place is. Temporary. Discardable. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They were discussing my humiliation like it was an art project. But the conversation shifted quickly from the party to something much darker, something that made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. I heard the sound of glass shattering followed by a curse from Jamal. Careful, Brittany snapped. Don't cut yourself. We don't need your DNA all over the place. I am fine, Jamal grunted. I just want to get this cleaned up so I can get out of here. Dante is going to be back from his beer run any minute. Speaking of Dante, Brittany's voice dropped, becoming low and venomous. I can't do this anymore, Jamal. I can't keep playing house with him. Every time he touches me, I want to scream. Last night he tried to feel the baby kick, and I almost slapped his hand away. He has these rough, calloused hands, and he just kept saying how excited he is to be a dad. It is repulsive. He is my brother Britt, Jamal said, though there was no defense in his tone, only a mild discomfort. He is a placeholder, she corrected him sharply, and a bad one at that. He can barely pay the rent on this dump. I am tired of pretending to be poor Jamal. I am tired of clipping coupons while your wife sits in that ivory tower of a brownstone buying art she doesn't even understand. She understands it, Jamal muttered. It is an investment. It is wasted on her, Brittany spat. Everything is wasted on her. She walks around like she is royalty just because she can balance a spreadsheet. But look at us. Look at this baby. There was a pause, a rustling of fabric. I imagined she was pulling his hand to her stomach. This is the only thing that matters, she whispered. Your son. Our son. Not Dante's mistake. Ours. He has your nose, Jamal. I saw it on the 4D ultrasound I hid from Dante. He is going to be strong like you, smart like you, and he deserves to grow up in that house, not in this shack. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. She had just confirmed it. Explicitly. Undeniably. The baby she was carrying, the nephew I was supposed to love, was my husband's child. My brother-in-law was living a lie, raising a child that wasn't his, while his wife plotted to steal his brother's fortune. "We are close, baby," Jamal said, his voice softening. "We are so close." "Not close enough." Brittany snapped, her mood swinging instantly back to aggression. "The poison is taking too long. You said the double dose would work today. You said she would be bleeding by the time the cake was cut. But she walked out of here fine. She even looked better." "She is faking it," Jamal insisted. "I saw her eyes. She is weak. The doctor said the toxicity is building up." "I don't trust the doctor, and I don't trust the pills," Brittany interrupted. "We need a guarantee. I am starting to show, Jamal. Really show. I can't wear these tent dresses forever. If Dante figures it out before she is gone, everything falls apart. We need to accelerate the timeline. Accelerate how Jamal asked. I can't just shoot her. That is too messy. The police would look at me first." "Accidents happen all the time," Brittany said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Especially to clumsy pregnant women who are already prone to dizzy spells. Remember the fainting act she pulled? She has a history now. It is documented." I held my breath. I knew what was coming. I had sensed it, but hearing them speak it into existence was a different kind of horror. "Next week," Brittany said. "Tuesday. You have that charity gala at the museum, right? The one she insists on going to every year to show off her donation status." "Yeah," Jamal said slowly. "She already bought the tickets." "Perfect," Brittany said. "The grand staircase at the museum. It is marble, steep, and she will be wearing heels because she is too vain to wear flats. All it takes is a little nudge, Jamal. A crowded room, a moment of distraction, a sudden dizzy spell, and she takes a tumble." Jamal was silent for a moment. "That is risky. There will be cameras. There are blind spots," Brittany countered instantly. "I looked up the floor plan online, the landing between the second and third floor near the abstract exhibit. There is no coverage there. You just have to guide her there. Tell her you want to show her a painting. And then—" "Oops. Oops," Jamal repeated. A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't horrified. He was considering it. It would solve everything, Brittany pressed. The fall would definitely kill the baby. And with her blood pressure issues, it would probably cause a stroke or a massive hemorrhage on impact. "It is clean. It is tragic. And you will be the devastated husband weeping over her broken body." I closed my eyes, visualizing the museum staircase. I knew exactly the spot she was talking about. I had stood there many times admiring the architecture. Now it was being drafted as my murder scene. "I can do it," Jamal said finally. His voice was steady. "Tuesday." "Good," Brittany said. "Because I am done waiting. I am done sharing you. And I am done with her." There was a pause, and then the sound of Brittany letting out a frustrated breath. "You know what I hate the most about her?" she asked, and I could hear the sneer in her voice. "It isn't even the money. It is the arrogance. She thinks she earned it. She thinks she is special because she clawed her way out of the neighborhood and got a fancy degree. But she is nothing. She is just a cash cow, Jamal, a stupid black cash cow that we have been milking for 5 years." The slur hung in the air, heavy and ugly. It wasn't just a racial insult, it was a reduction of my entire existence. To them, I wasn't a human being. I wasn't a wife or a sister. I was livestock. I was an animal to be used, drained of resources, and then slaughtered when I was no longer useful. "She just knows how to count money," Brittany continued, laughing. "But she is too stupid to see that her husband has been sleeping with her sister-in-law under her own roof. She bought me this dress. Did you know that I used her credit card to buy the dress I am wearing to celebrate her death? The irony is delicious." "Yeah," Jamal chuckled, a low, dark sound. "She paid for the very shovel we are going to use to bury her." I reached out and stopped the recording. I didn't need to hear anymore. I had the confession. I had the motive. I had the plan. I had the hate crime. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. The fear was gone, burned away by a white-hot rage that felt like it could melt the dashboard. They called me a cash cow. They called me stupid. They thought they were the architects of a perfect crime, discussing my murder while cleaning up potato salad in a backyard rental. I unplugged the receiver and connected it to my laptop. I initiated the upload sequence immediately. The file labeled simply, "The Confession," was encrypted and sent to 3 separate servers: my cloud storage, my lawyer's secure portal, and a dead man's switch I had set up years ago that would email the file to the district attorney if I didn't log in for 48 hours. I watched the progress bar fill up. 20%, 50%, 80%. They were planning for Tuesday. They thought they had 4 days to prep. They thought they were hunting a clueless victim who would walk blindly onto a marble staircase. Download complete. I shut the laptop with a snap. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen. The woman looking back at me wasn't the Dominique they knew. That Dominique was dead. She had died in that backyard when she heard her husband agree to push her down a flight of stairs. The woman sitting in the car now was something else entirely. I was the auditor, and I had just found the discrepancy that was going to cost them their lives. I wasn't going to wait for Tuesday. Tuesday was too far away. Tuesday gave them time to rethink, to change the plan. I needed to strike while they were arrogant. I needed to bring the timeline forward. The gender reveal party was tomorrow night. Perfect. I put the car in gear. I drove away from that house, slowly obeying every traffic law. I didn't want to get pulled over. I had work to do. I had a speech to write. I had a video editor to hire to splice together the footage from the kitchen, the audio from the backyard, and the screenshots of their texts. As I merged onto the highway heading back to the city, I let out a scream. It was a primal, guttural sound that tore through my throat, releasing the agony of the betrayal. I screamed for the baby who would never know his father. I screamed for the 5 years of my life I had wasted on a monster. I screamed for the insult, for the disrespect, for the sheer audacity of their evil. And then silence returned. I wiped my face. I checked my makeup in the mirror. "Let them call me a cash cow," I whispered to the empty car. "Because tomorrow night, the cow is going to kick down the barn, and they are going to be trapped inside when it burns." I drove home to the house they wanted to steal, walked through the door they wanted to lock me out of, and greeted Jamal with a kiss when he came home an hour later. "Did you have fun helping Brittany?" I asked, looking into his lying eyes. "It was exhausting," he lied smoothly. "But family is family, right?" "Right?" I agreed. "Family is everything." He didn't notice that I didn't say our family. He didn't notice the sharpness in my smile. He went to sleep thinking he had until Tuesday. He didn't know that his deadline had just moved up. The audit was closed. The findings were conclusive. And the penalty phase was about to begin. Friday morning arrived with the deceptive calm of a hurricane eye. While Jamal was in the shower, scrubbing away the guilt of his double life, I was in my home office executing a financial airstrike that would leave his accomplices homeless. I pulled up the file on my brother-in-law Dante and his wife Brittany. They lived in a rental property that was actually a rent-to-own scheme they had entered into 3 years ago. They had been bragging about how they were going to own the place by Christmas. But I knew the truth. I knew they were 3 months behind on payments, and the owner was desperate to sell the bad debt. I logged into the portal of my shell company, Artemis Holdings. It was a sterile, nameless entity I used for high-risk investments, completely untraceable to Dominique the wife. With 3 clicks, I purchased the deed to their house and their outstanding debt for pennies on the dollar. The transaction cleared instantly. I sat back in my chair staring at the screen. I was now Brittany's landlord. I was the one holding the eviction notice. And I instructed my property management software to auto-generate a notice to quit for non-payment effective immediately. It would arrive in their mailbox tomorrow, right before the party. Brittany wanted to move into my house. She was going to have to because she was about to be kicked out of hers. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was Jamal. I checked my watch. 11:00 a.m. The trap was set. I had arranged a lunch meeting for Jamal with a man named Julian. To Jamal, Julian was a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley who was looking for silent partners for a revolutionary lithium mining AI project in Nevada. In reality, Julian was an actor I had hired from a local theater troupe coached by me for 3 days on financial jargon and outfitted with a rented Brioni suit and a fake Patek Philippe watch. I walked into the kitchen as Jamal was knotting his tie. He looked sharp, confident. He thought he was meeting a ticket to the Billionaires Club. "Good luck at lunch, baby," I said, straightening his collar. "You said this guy Julian is a big deal." "Huge." Jamal beamed, checking his reflection in the microwave door. "He is strictly private equity. He doesn't talk to just anyone. I think he sees potential in me." "I am sure he does." I smiled. "You have always been easy to read." Jamal left the house with a spring in his step. I waited 5 minutes, then opened my laptop to track his location. I also opened the remote viewing app for the hidden camera I had clipped onto Julian's jacket disguised as a lapel pin. I was going to watch my husband bankrupt himself in 4K resolution. I watched the feed as they met at a steakhouse downtown. Julian was perfect. He was aloof, slightly bored, checking his phone constantly, the classic power move of someone who doesn't need your money. Jamal was leaning forward, desperate, sweating slightly. "The buy-in is steep, Jamal," I heard Julian say through the audio feed. "And the round closes at 400 p.m. today. We are trying to keep the cap table clean. If you are not liquid, I understand. There is always the next unicorn." Jamal swallowed hard. "How much for a 1% stake?" 200,000, Julian said casually, cutting his steak. "Cash wire. No credit. We move fast." I saw Jamal's eyes dart around the room. 200,000 was almost exactly the amount he and Brittany had skimmed into the J&B Future Fund over the last 2 years. It was their getaway money. It was the nest egg for their new life. "I can do it," Jamal said, his voice cracking slightly. "I can make the transfer right now." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure this is high risk, high reward?" "I am sure," Jamal insisted, pulling out his phone. He opened his banking app. I watched on my own screen as he logged into the Cayman account. I saw the balance, $210,000. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about Brittany. He was thinking about how angry she would be if he touched this money. But then greed took over. He thought about how much better it would be to leave me with 10 million instead of 200,000. He thought he could turn this investment around in a month and put the money back before she noticed. He tapped the screen. "Transfer complete." "Done," Jamal said, showing Julian the screen. Julian smiled a shark-like grin. "Welcome to the future, Jamal." I closed the laptop. The money had just moved from the Cayman account to a holding account controlled by Julian, which was actually controlled by me. And the second it hit that account, it was automatically donated to a nonprofit organization dedicated to legal defense for victims of domestic abuse. The money was gone, vaporized. Jamal came home 4 hours later. He was buzzing with adrenaline. He kissed me on the cheek, practically vibrating. "Great meeting," I asked, chopping vegetables for dinner. "Life-changing, Dom." "Life-changing." He went into his office. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was logging in to check his investment portfolio on the fake portal Julian had given him. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then I heard a sound that was music to my ears. A chair being shoved back violently against a hardwood floor. I walked to the doorway of his office. Jamal was staring at his computer screen, his face a mask of pure horror. He was frantically refreshing the page. "Error 404. Page not found." He grabbed his phone and dialed Julian. I could hear the automated message from where I stood. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He dialed again. And again. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped the phone. "Jamal," I asked, stepping into the room, "is everything okay?" He spun around, his eyes wild. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He looked at me, then at the computer, then back at me. He couldn't tell me. He couldn't say, "I just lost the money I stole from you to a con artist." He was trapped in his own lie. I I think I made a mistake, he whispered, his voice trembling. What kind of mistake? I asked, walking over and putting a hand on his shoulder. A business deal, he choked out. I moved some funds, liquid funds, and now I can't reach the broker. How much funds, Jamal? I asked, keeping my voice calm and concerned. He sank into his chair, putting his head in his hands. A lot. Everything I had saved. He looked up at me, desperation clawing at his throat. Dom, I need help. I need a loan. Just a short-term bridge loan. 50,000, no, 100,000, just to cover some margin calls until this gets sorted. He was asking me to bail him out. He wanted me to replace the money he stole from me so he could pretend it never happened. I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. Oh, Jamal, I wish you had told me earlier. What? What do you mean? He asked, hope flaring in his eyes. I sighed, sitting on the edge of the desk. You know how you are always telling me to be more charitable, to think about your legacy. Yeah, he urged. Well, after the hospital scare, seeing the white light, it changed me, Jamal. I realized I was holding on to too much cash. It felt heavy. So this afternoon, while you were at lunch, I liquidated our savings account. His jaw dropped. You what? I donated it, I said, smiling beatifically. To the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And the local orphanage. All of it. $250,000. Jamal made a sound like a dying animal. A high-pitched wheeze escaped his throat. You gave away all our cash. Not all of it, I reassured him. I kept enough for the gender reveal party tomorrow, but the rest gone. It felt so good, Jamal. I did it in your name. You should be receiving a thank you plaque in 6 to 8 weeks. He stared at me, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He was broke. He had drained his secret fund and I had drained the marital fund. He had zero liquidity. He couldn't pay Brittany's rent. He couldn't pay the hitman he was probably thinking of hiring. He couldn't even pay for a lawyer. Why would you do that without asking me? He whispered, tears of rage and panic filling his eyes. Because we are partners, I said, stroking his cheek. And I know your heart, Jamal. I know you care about children more than money. Isn't that what you always tell me? He couldn't answer. He just sat there shaking. He was drowning, and I was pouring water into the boat. I stood up. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Wash up, babe. You look like you have seen a ghost. I walked out of the office, leaving him in the ruin he had created. He was financially crippled. Brittany was about to be homeless, and tomorrow night I was going to finish the job. I went back to the kitchen and stirred the pot. The aroma of victory was sweeter than any meal I had ever cooked. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to the video editor I had hired. Add the footage from the restaurant to the final cut. I want the moment he hits transfer to be in slow motion. I put the phone down. Jamal didn't come out for dinner. I ate alone, savoring every bite. The financial ruin was complete. Now all that was left was the public execution. Saturday night arrived, draped in the deceptive glamour of a high society gala. I had rented the grand ballroom at the Peninsula, a venue that screamed old money and permanence. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold leaf ceiling, casting a warm, expensive glow over the hundreds of white roses I had commissioned for the centerpieces. I wanted this night to be perfect. I wanted it to be etched into the memory of every single person in attendance, not as a celebration of life, but as the scene of a magnificent execution. I stood in the center of the empty ballroom for a moment before the doors opened, taking in the silence. In a few hours, this room would be filled with the screams of a shattered family, but for now, it was just me and the stage. I was not wearing maternity pastels tonight. I was not wearing the soft blues or pinks that society expects from a mother to be. I was wearing red, a deep blood-red silk gown that hugged my curves and trailed behind me like a river of fire. It was a statement piece. It was war paint. I had paired it with the diamond earrings Jamal had given me on our first anniversary, a reminder of the man he used to pretend to be. The guests began to arrive at 7 o'clock sharp. I greeted them at the top of the grand staircase, standing alone, a queen holding court. My friends, the ones who had witnessed the rusty stroller incident, arrived first. They looked at me with a mixture of concern and anticipation. They knew something was coming, though they didn't know the specifics. Dr. Stevens was there, looking regal in navy blue, giving me a subtle nod as she took a glass of champagne. She was my medic on the sidelines, ready to step in if the stress became too physical. But tonight, I felt invincible. Then, the guests of honor began to trickle in. First, it was Brittany's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. They were stiff, conservative people who drove in from the affluent suburbs of Naperville. They were the kind of people who cared deeply about appearances, church attendance, and moral standing. They had never really liked me, finding my career too aggressive and my background too urban, but they tolerated me because I was wealthy. I greeted them with a warm, predatory smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, thank you for coming," I said, taking Mrs. Henderson's cold hand. "Dominique, you look striking," Mrs. Henderson said, eyeing my red dress with thinly veiled disapproval. "A bit bold for a baby shower, isn't it?" "It is a gender reveal, Margaret," I corrected her gently. "And tonight is all about revealing the truth. Boldness is required." They moved into the ballroom looking uncomfortable. Perfect. Then came Dante. My brother-in-law looked exhausted. He was wearing a suit that had seen better days, fraying slightly at the cuffs. He held a gift bag tightly against his chest, looking around the opulent room with wide, nervous eyes. He loved Brittany so much it hurt to look at him. He worked double shifts to pay for her lifestyle, to pay for the rental house she hated, and he had no idea that his wife was currently pregnant with his brother's child. "Hey, Dom," he said, giving me a genuine hug. "This place is amazing. I can't believe you did all this." "You deserve a good party, Dante," I said, squeezing his shoulder. "You have been working too hard. Tonight I want you to relax. I want you to see exactly what you have been working for." He smiled, oblivious to the double meaning. Finally, they arrived, the stars of my show. Jamal and Brittany walked in together, though they put a few feet of distance between them as they approached me. Jamal was wearing his tuxedo, trying to project the image of the successful entrepreneur, but I knew better. I looked at the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darted around the room, scanning for the exits. He was a man walking on a tightrope over a pit of alligators. He was broke, he was desperate, and he was terrified that his fake investor Julian would somehow show up or call. Brittany was wearing a long, shimmering silver dress that was far too tight for a woman trying to hide a pregnancy. She looked radiant with greed. She walked with a swagger, her eyes devouring the luxury of the room. She was practically mentally redecorating the venue. "Hey, baby," Jamal said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His lips were cold. "You look incredible. That red, it is intense." "I thought it fit the mood," I said, stepping back so his touch wouldn't linger. "Passion, danger, love. All the big emotions, right?" "Right?" He laughed nervously. He looked past me at the crowd. "Everyone is here. Even my old partners. I invited everyone, Jamal. Your investors, your frat brothers, the board members of the charity. I wanted everyone to witness this chapter of our lives." Brittany stepped forward, looking me up and down. "You really went all out, Dom. Spending the last of the family money on a party?" I smiled at her. "It is an investment, Brittany. Memories are priceless. Besides, I wanted to make sure the baby had a proper introduction to the world. No rusty strollers tonight." She narrowed her eyes, but she couldn't snap back with her parents standing 10 feet away. We mingled for an hour. I moved through the room like a ghost, listening to snippets of conversation. I heard Jamal trying to network with a real estate developer, pitching a deal that I knew he didn't have the capital to back. I heard Brittany bragging to her mother about how she was helping me manage the household because I was so frail. "She is practically an invalid, Mom," I heard Brittany whisper. I am basically raising this baby for her already. I took a sip of sparkling water, letting the rage fuel me. They were so confident. They truly believed they had won. They thought this party was my surrender, my final act of spending before the tragic accident on Tuesday. At 8:30, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage where a massive screen had been set up. The music lowered to a dramatic drum roll. It was time. I walked to the microphone stand in the center of the stage. The red dress caught the light, making me look like I was burning. The room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. I saw Jamal and Brittany standing in the front row, right next to Dante and the Hendersons. They were holding champagne flutes, smiling, ready to applaud for blue or pink. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice echoing through the massive hall. My voice was steady, calm, and commanding. "Tonight is a very special night. Most people think a gender reveal is just about blue or pink. It is about boys or girls. But I think it should be about more than that. It should be about legacy. It should be about DNA. It should be about the truth." I paused, letting the word truth hang in the air. I saw Jamal shift his weight. He loosened his bow tie slightly. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed," I continued. "I thought about the future. I thought about the values I wanted to pass down. Honesty, loyalty, integrity." I looked directly at Jamal. But sometimes life gives us a different kind of reveal. Sometimes we find out that the people closest to us aren't who they say they are. Sometimes we find out that the family we trust is actually the enemy at the gate. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the standard happy speech. The tension in the room spiked. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the front row. My husband Jamal has always been a man of big dreams. He dreams of wealth. He dreams of status. He dreams of a life where he doesn't have to work, where everything is handed to him. And my sister-in-law Brittany, well, she dreams of those things too. Brittany's smile faltered. She glanced at her parents, who were frowning. They dreamed so big, in fact, that they decided my dreams didn't matter anymore. They decided that my life didn't matter anymore. Jamal took a step forward, his face pale. "Dom, what are you doing? Are you feeling dizzy? Do you need to sit down?" He was trying to use the medical narrative. He was trying to discredit me before I even started. "I have never felt more awake, Jamal," I said sharply. "I am not dizzy. I am focused." I pointed to the screen behind me. "You all came here expecting to see a color. You came to see if I am having a son or a daughter. And don't worry, you will see that. But first we need to clear up some confusion, because there seems to be more than one pregnancy in the family right now." The room gasped. Brittany dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound ringing out like a gunshot. Dante looked at his wife, confusion washing over his face. "Brittany," he asked, "what is she talking about?" Brittany was frozen. She stared at me with pure hatred, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I signaled to the tech booth. "Roll the tape." The massive screen behind me flickered to life, but it wasn't a cute animation of storks or teddy bears. It was a high-definition video feed. The first image was from the hidden camera in my kitchen. It was stamped with a date from 2 weeks ago. It showed Jamal standing at the kitchen island. He looked over his shoulder, checking to see if I was coming. Then he reached into the cabinet. The audience watched in silence as he pulled out the small, unmarked pill bottle. They watched him pour the white powder into the blender. They watched the concentration on his face as he mixed the poison that was meant to kill me. A collective gasp ripped through the room. That is vitamins," Jamal shouted, pointing at the screen, sweat pouring down his face. "I was making her vitamins. She is twisting this." "Is she?" I asked into the mic. The video cut. The next scene was the interior of a car. It was the footage I had reconstructed from the audio recording in the backyard, overlaid with the text of their conversation, scrolling on the screen like subtitles in a horror movie. Brittany's voice. The poison is taking too long. You said the double dose would work today. Jamal's voice. She is faking it. The doctor said the toxicity is building up. Brittany's voice. I can't wait until Tuesday. Push her down the stairs at the museum. It needs to look like an accident. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Mr. Henderson, Brittany's father, stood up. His face was purple with rage. He looked at his daughter. Brittany was shaking her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. Dad, no, it is AI. She faked it. She used a computer to make our voices. She is crazy. But the video wasn't done. The screen changed again. This time it was a series of screenshots, the chat logs, the text messages. Jamal, I measured the office. It will make a perfect nursery for our son. Brittany. I can't wait to move in. I hate Dante. I hate being poor. Jamal. Just wait until the funeral. We get the 5 million. We get the house. And then the final blow. The paternity test I had run using the DNA from the glass Brittany drank from at the baby shower. I had rushed the results. The document appeared on the screen magnified 10 times. Prenatal paternity test. Mother. Brittany Jenkins alleged. Father Jamal Jenkins. Probability of paternity. 99.9%. Dante let out a sound that I will never forget. It was a howl of pure heartbreak. He looked at the screen, then at his brother, then at his wife. He is mine, Dante whispered, his voice breaking. You told me we were trying. You told me. He stepped away from Brittany as if she were radioactive. I stood on the stage, the red dress flowing around me, looking down at the wreckage I had caused. Jamal looked at the investors he had tried to impress. They were looking at him with disgust. He looked at his friends. They were turning their backs. He looked at me, and his eyes were black with hatred. You ruined everything, he mouthed. I raised the microphone one last time. People think we are here to see the gender of my child, I asked, my voice ringing with finality. I pressed the button on the remote in my hand. The screen turned black for a second, then exploded in a shower of blue and pink fireworks, revealing the words, "It's a girl." But I didn't stop there. No, I said. We are not here for that. We are here to see the true face of a monster. And I think the reveal is complete. I pointed to the back of the room. The doors opened. 4 uniformed police officers marched in, led by a detective holding a warrant. Happy gender reveal, Jamal, I said, dropping the mic. It is a girl, and she will never, ever know your name. The room erupted into chaos. The lights came up harsh and unforgiving, exposing them all. The party was over. The nightmare had just begun. The room was in a state of suspended animation, the kind of silence that precedes a tsunami. The words, "It is a girl," were fading from the screen, replaced by the stark, high-definition horror of the security footage I had queued up as the grand finale. I stood on the stage looking down at the people who had tried to bury me, and I felt a calm so deep it was almost spiritual. The video playing behind me was undeniable. It showed Jamal in the kitchen, not fuzzy or grainy, but crystal clear in 4K resolution. The camera zoomed in on his hands, the same hands that had held mine at the altar as they carefully opened the small, unmarked vial. The audience watched him pour the white powder into the blender, his face twisted in a mask of concentration that I used to mistake for dedication. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, a sound that started low and rose to a crescendo of disbelief. Then came the audio. I had synced the recording from the backyard party to play over the footage of Brittany and Jamal laughing together at a previous family gathering. The contrast was sickening. Brittany's voice boomed through the high-quality speakers, sharp and venomous. She was laughing about Dante, calling him pathetic, mocking his rough hands and his low salary. She called him a placeholder. She admitted in her own words that she recoiled every time he touched her. I saw Dante standing in the front row, his face draining of all color, his knees buckling slightly as the woman he worshipped dismantled his manhood for sport. The video shifted again, this time to the financial evidence. It was a slideshow of theft, Bank statements appeared highlighted in red showing the transfers from our joint account to the J&B Future Fund. Invoices for the diamond ring she was wearing right now flashed on the screen next to unpaid bills for the rental house Dante was struggling to keep afloat. The crowd turned on them. I could feel the energy in the room shift from shock to aggression. These were Jamal's investors, his fraternity brothers, people who valued money and loyalty above all else, and they were seeing a man who stole from his pregnant wife to fund a mistress. Suddenly, the paralysis broke. Dante moved before anyone could stop him. He didn't look like the gentle, soft-spoken IT guy anymore. He looked like a man possessed. He lunged at Jamal with a primal roar that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Jamal tried to back away, raising his hands in a pathetic attempt to defend himself, but he was too slow. Dante's fist connected with Jamal's nose with a sickening crunch that was audible even over the murmurs of the crowd. Jamal went down hard, blood instantly spraying onto his white tuxedo shirt. Dante didn't stop. He grabbed Jamal by the lapels, dragging him up only to shove him back down, screaming incoherently about the betrayal, about the late nights he worked, about the love he had wasted. Security guards rushed forward, pulling Dante off his brother, but the damage was done. Jamal lay on the marble floor, clutching his broken face, looking up at the screen that was still broadcasting his crimes. But the violence wasn't over. Mrs. Henderson, Brittany's mother, a woman who prided herself on propriety and church standing, walked up to her daughter. Brittany was standing frozen, tears streaming down her face, murmuring that it wasn't true, that it was all fake. Mrs. Henderson didn't say a word. She pulled her arm back and delivered a slap across Brittany's face that sounded like a pistol shot. It was a strike fueled by decades of repressed disappointment and the sudden public humiliation of her family name. Brittany stumbled back, clutching her cheek, looking at her mother with wide, terrified eyes. "You are no daughter of mine," Mrs. Henderson spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You are a disgrace. Do not look at me. Do not speak to me." I watched it all from my perch on the stage, the red silk of my dress flowing around me like the robes of a judge. I tapped the microphone, drawing the attention back to me. The room fell silent again, the only sounds being Jamal's groans and Brittany's sobbing. "There is one last thing," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "We have established that Jamal is a thief. We have established that Brittany is a liar. But there is one more truth that needs to be told tonight." I clicked the remote one final time. The screen changed to the DNA test results I had received earlier that day. The font was large, bold, and unforgiving. Prenatal paternity test subject: unborn child of Brittany Jenkins. Biological father: Jamal Jenkins. Probability 99.9%. The gasp from the crowd this time was different. It was a sound of pure scandal. Dante looked at the screen and the fight went out of him completely. He slumped into the arms of a security guard, weeping openly. The betrayal was absolute. The child he had been excited for, the nursery he had scraped pennies to build, was a lie. Brittany shrieked. It was a high, keen sound of a trapped animal. She looked around for an exit, but the crowd had formed a tight circle blocking her path. She was trapped in the center of her own wreckage. That is when the double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a heavy thud. 4 police officers marched in, their expressions grim and purposeful. They were led by Detective Miller, a man I had been meeting with secretly for the past 3 days. He walked straight through the parting crowd, his eyes fixed on the couple cowering near the stage. "Jamal Jenkins and Brittany Jenkins," he announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "You are under arrest." Jamal tried to scramble backward, blood still dripping from his nose. For what he sputtered: "This is a misunderstanding. My wife is crazy. She set me up. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." Detective Miller continued, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "We have the toxicology reports from your wife's blood. We have the physical evidence of the tampered supplements found in your home. And we have the audio confession of your plan to stage a fatal accident at the museum." Brittany tried to run. She actually hiked up her silver dress and tried to dart past her mother, but Mrs. Henderson didn't move an inch to help her. An officer grabbed Brittany's arms, spinning her around. "Get off me!" Brittany screamed, thrashing like a wildcat. It was him. It was all Jamal. He made me do it. He said we needed the money. I didn't want to kill her. I watched as the handcuffs clicked onto Brittany's wrists. She was screaming, blaming the man she claimed to love just seconds ago. Jamal was crying now, pathetic, heaving sobs as he was hauled to his feet. Dominique Jamal yelled, looking up at me on the stage. Dominique, baby, please. Tell them it is a mistake. We can work this out. I love you. Think about our baby. I looked down at him. He looked small. He looked weak. He looked nothing like the man who had terrorized me. I walked down the stairs of the stage, the crowd parting for me as I approached him. I stopped just out of reach, looking him dead in the eye. I am thinking about our baby Jamal. I said, my voice low and lethal. That is why you are going to prison. Because I will never let a monster like you near her. Dom, please, he begged, snot and blood mixing on his face. I can explain. It was just talk. I never would have done it. You already did it, I said. You poisoned me. You betrayed your brother. You destroyed your family. And for what? For money you don't even have. I leaned in closer. By the way, Julian isn't an investor. He is an actor. And the money you transferred yesterday? It is gone. I donated it to a women's shelter in your name. You are broke, Jamal. You have no money for a lawyer. You have no house. You have nothing. His eyes went wide with true horror. The realization that he had lost the last of his safety net hit him harder than Dante's fist. Officer, take them away, I said, straightening up and turning my back on him. Wait, Jamal screamed as they dragged him towards the exit. Dominique, does this mean we are over? What about the divorce? I stopped and looked over my shoulder, flashing him a smile that was colder than the grave. Oh, don't worry about the paperwork, Jamal. The petition for divorce was filed this morning. I signed my part. I watched as the heavy doors began to close behind them, framing his desperate face one last time. But you, I said, my voice ringing out in the silent ballroom, you will have to sign yours in a cage. The doors slammed shut. The room was deadly quiet for a heartbeat, and then slowly applause began to build. It started with my friends, then the investors who realized I had saved them from a fraud, and finally even Brittany's parents joined in. It wasn't applause for a performance. It was applause for justice. I stood there in my red dress, the survivor of a war fought in the shadows, and for the first time in months I felt completely and utterly safe. The reveal was over. The trash had been taken out, and I was ready to begin my life. 6 months have passed since the night the fireworks went off, and the handcuffs clicked shut. 6 months of silence, healing, and the kind of peace that I used to think was a myth. I am sitting in the nursery now, a room that was once measured for my husband's illegitimate son, but is now painted a soft, serene lavender for my daughter. The morning sun is streaming through the sheer curtains, dancing on the crib where she is sleeping. Her name is Maya. It means illusion in Sanskrit, a reminder that I saw through the illusion of my marriage to find the reality of my strength. She is healthy, she is beautiful, and most importantly, she is safe. The brownstone feels different now. For a long time, even after they were arrested, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves held the memory of their betrayal. I spent the first few weeks scrubbing every surface, not just to clean, but to reclaim. I hired a spiritual cleanser to sage the rooms, and then I hired a contractor to tear out the kitchen island where Jamal had mixed his poisons. I replaced it with a beautiful quartz countertop, a symbol of something hard, durable, and impossible to stain. Now, when I walk through these halls, I don't hear their whispers or their plotting. I hear the cooing of my daughter and the steady rhythm of my own heart beating without fear. The trial was the spectacle of the season in Chicago. I didn't attend every day. I had a pregnancy to protect. But I was there for the verdict. I needed to be. I sat in the front row wearing the same white suit I wore when I graduated with my master's degree in forensic accounting. I wanted them to see the professional, not the victim. Jamal and Brittany tried to turn on each other, of course, That is what rats do when the ship sinks. They eat their own. Jamal's lawyer tried to paint him as a manipulated husband under the spell of a younger woman. Brittany's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of Jamal's coercive control. It was pathetic. It was a circus. But the jury didn't buy a single ticket. The video evidence was too clear. The audio recordings were too damning. The DNA test was the final nail. When the judge read the sentence, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Jamal Jenkins, for the crimes of conspiracy to commit murder in the first-degree insurance fraud and attempted poisoning, you are sentenced to 20 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. I watched him collapse. He didn't look at me. He put his head on the table and sobbed a sound that brought me no joy, but a profound sense of closure. Brittany got 15 years. She screamed when they led her away, blaming everyone but herself, still the entitled girl who thought the world owed her a living. Her baby, the son Jamal wanted so desperately, was born in the prison infirmary 2 months ago. He is currently in the custody of the state, as Mrs. Henderson refused to take him in. It is a tragedy for that innocent child, but it is a cycle of toxicity that I have removed myself from completely. As for Dante, he didn't stay to see the verdict. The shame was too much for him. He was a good man who fell in love with a mirage. He filed for divorce the day after the party and moved to Arizona a week later. He sent me a letter recently, no return address, just a short note apologizing for not seeing the truth, for letting them use him as a pawn. I don't blame him. We were both blinded by people who knew exactly how to manipulate our desire for family. I hope he finds peace in the desert far away from the wreckage of the Jenkins name. Financially, the audit is finally closed. My team and I spent months unraveling the web of deceit Jamal had spun. We found accounts I didn't know existed, credit cards opened in my name, and loans taken out against future assets. But I am the best in the business for a reason. I tracked every single penny. I petitioned the court for a full restitution order, and because I had frozen the assets immediately after the party, we were able to recover almost everything. The money he tried to hide in the Cayman Islands, the funds he tried to give to the fake investor Julian, it all came back. I took the money he had stolen, every single cent that he and Brittany had earmarked for their new life, and I put it into a trust fund for Maya. It is poetic justice. The resources they tried to kill me for will now ensure that their victim's daughter never has to worry about her future. I also made a substantial donation to the domestic violence shelter, just as I promised Jamal I would. His legacy won't be wealth. It will be the women he unknowingly helped save. I stand up and walk to the window looking out over the Chicago skyline. The city is waking up, bustling with life. I used to think my life was over when Dr. Stevens showed me that blood report. I thought I had lost everything. But looking back, I realize I didn't lose anything. I shed a dead weight. I cut off a gangrenous limb so the rest of the body could survive. I hear Maya stirring in her crib. I walk over and pick her up, holding her close to my chest. She smells like milk and innocence. She looks at me with wide, curious eyes, eyes that see only love, not dollar signs. People ask me if I am bitter. They ask if I will ever trust again. And I tell them this trust is an asset just like cash or property. You don't give it away freely. You invest it wisely, and you audit it regularly. I survived because I stopped looking at my marriage with my heart and started looking at it with my eyes. I survived because I remembered who I was. I walk over to the mirror in the hallway, the one where I used to check my reflection and wonder why I looked so tired. The woman staring back at me now is vibrant. She is a mother. She is a survivor. She is a CEO. I look directly into the camera of my own soul. They thought I was a cash cow. They thought I was a lamb to be led to the slaughter. They thought they could erase me and rewrite the ledger of my life with their own greedy ink. But they forgot the most important rule of accounting. You have to balance the books. I smile, a genuine, full smile that reaches my eyes. I am Dominique. I am a forensic accountant, And I have balanced every single debt, to the very last penny. I kiss Maya's forehead and walk downstairs into the sunlight. The nightmare is over. The audit is complete. And for the first time in a long time, the numbers finally add up to happiness. The most powerful lesson from Dominique's story is that blind trust is a liability even in marriage. Her journey proves that your greatest asset isn't your wealth, but your intuition and intelligence. When betrayal strikes, you don't have to remain a victim. You can become the auditor of your own life. True strength comes from facing the ugly truth and understanding that family is defined by loyalty, not just blood. Sometimes the only way to balance the books is to cut the toxic liabilities completely out of your life. If this story of poetic justice satisfied you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Have you ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you? Let me know your story in the comments below.